everybody. Welcome to episode 7 of Road to 2024. State Senator Tim Neville has announced his intention to run in the 2022 Colorado Senate race. Tim Neville, a very well-known state senator, he will be the first of many Republicans to announce their intention to run against Senator Michael Bennet. He's not the first, he's one of the many first who will announce their intention. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal has announced his intention to run for re-election in the 2022 midterms. Richard Blumenthal, a very well-known, very senior senator, and within the Senate, there is no doubt he's going to win big in his re-election bid. Congressman Mark Amodei has announced his intention to run for governor in Nevada in 2022. Probably the most well-known conservative congressman in Nevada, Mark Amodei, will pose a good threat to Steve Sisolak's re-election attempt. Idaho Senator Mike Crapo has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. Mike Crapo won by a very big margin. I think he was uncontested back in 2016. And there is no doubt that he will have little to no trouble being re-elected in 2022. Former HUD Secretary of the Obama administration, Julian Castro, has announced his intention to run for governor in Texas in the 2022 midterms. The second former 2020 presidential candidate to do so, the first being Beto O'Rourke. John Delaney also joining in that mix in Maryland. Julian Castro did not see a bunch of, success in the presidential race, blocking behind O'Rourke in major polls in both Texas and nationwide. He's going to have to do a lot to make sure he gets the nomination and not his opponent, Beto O'Rourke. Former Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn has announced his intention to run for Senate in Florida in 2022. A mayor of a very populous city, Bob Buckhorn has the intention of flipping the Florida seat blue in 2022. The seat being currently held by Marco Rubio. Howard County Executive Alan Kittleman has announced his intention to run for governor in Maryland in 2022. The first Republican to do so, to announce his intention. He's going to have a very upward steep to fill if he wants to succeed Larry Hogan, a very popular governor who is term limited. However, Alan Kittleman said he would change things a lot differently than Larry Hogan, doing a more conservative way of governing the state of Maryland. New York City Mayor Andrew Yang has announced his intention to run for president in 2024. A very early campaign, Andrew Yang has been known to announce things early, and this is no exception with running for president in 2024. Andrew Yang said he would have announced sooner, but he was having to deal with being mayor of a great city such as New York. Of course, Andrew Yang being known to be the man who single-handedly made universal basic income a national idea, I guess you could say. He made it to national spotlight just by himself, as former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and former HUD Secretary Julian Castro has said that they would pilot that in some way if they became president. Andrew Yang, very popular with the Trump supporters, as many of his supporters went back to supporting the president in the 2020 election, as many people would assume. Now let's see if Andrew Yang can actually win the nomination in 2024. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has announced her intention to run for re-election in the 2022 midterms, cutting it very close as the primaries are very soon. The Iowa governor is going to have to do her best to win re-election, as this is going to be a mid-term election, which will most likely favor Democrats, as it does during many midterm elections, the opposite of a Republican. Though she did very well back in 2018, there is little to no doubt that she could win re-election again if she plays her cards right. The first Iowa governor Democrat debate has concurred, and we have the On the Issues poll. When it comes to candidate Rob Hogg, he has 3% support for his tax cut policies, 16% support for his workforce training, policy, 27% support for his education policy, 33% for his Medicaid policy, and 45% for his mental health awareness policy. 22% of voters thought he had won the debate. When it came to Chris Hall, 27% had support for his tax cut policy, 28% for his workforce training policy, 14% for his education policy, 23% for his Medicaid policy, 16% for his mental health awareness policy. 19% of voters who attended or watched the debate thought he was the winner of the debate. Janet Peterson, her support goes from 12% support when it comes to tax cuts, 19% support when it comes to workforce training, 28% to education, 24% to Medicaid, 20% to mental health awareness, and 18% of voters thought she had won the debate. Joe Bolcom has 32% support when it comes to tax cuts, 27% support with the workforce training, 22% of support for education, 17% support for Medicaid, 12% support for mental health awareness, and 19% of voters thought he had won the debate. When it came to Nate Bolton, 6% of voters, 6% of voters thought he supported his policy for tax cut, 2% for workforce training, 13% for education, 8% for Medicaid, 10% for mental health awareness, 5% of voters thought he had won the debate. Bob Kraus, a former state congressman, 20% of voters thought he had support his tax cut policies, 35% support his workforce training policy, 18% support his education policy, 12% support his Medicaid policy, and only 9% support his mental health awareness policy. 17% of voters thought he had won the debate. Boston Mayor Marty Walsh announced his intention to challenge Governor Charlie Baker in the 2022 Massachusetts governor race. One of the first Democrats to do so. He's not very popular amongst the Democrats, but but a name recognition alone could get him the nomination in the Massachusetts gubernatorial primary into the Democrat. Missouri Senator Roy Blunt has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. Missouri being thought of as a seat that Democrats could win in 2022 are probably going to target the seat, and Roy Blunt, not a strong candidate, is going to have to do everything he can to win re-election. Former State Assemblywoman Sharon Angle announces her intention to run for Senate in Nevada in 2022. A Republican, she is going to have to pull out all the stops if she wants to take out Catherine Cortez Masto. Former state congressman Joe Dorman announced his intention to run for governor in Oklahoma, a Democrat. He believes that he can get the same amount of luck that Kendra Horn did back in 2018 when she won a House seat in Oklahoma. Joe Dorman, very charismatic, very young. He thinks he can take out Kevin Stitt and the general if he were to win the nomination. Former Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley announces his intention to run for governor in 2022. He had chose not to back in 2018, but now he feels like he needs to take out Gretchen Whitmer, who he says is a snake to the state of Michigan, using a biblical term there to describe Governor Whitmer. Businessman Mike Lindell has announced his intention to run for governor of Minnesota in 2022. Mike Lindell had a lot of speculation about him back in 2020, when there was thoughts that he could challenge Ilhan Omar for her seat, but he decided not to, opting out. However, Mike Lindell threw his support behind the president, which could be the reason why the president did so well in the state of Minnesota. Mike Lindell now hopes to be able to flip the Minnesota governor's seat to red the first time for many, many years. Former State Education Secretary Rebecca Holmcomb announces her intention to run for governor in 2022. Rebecca Holmcomb got second in 2020, losing to David Zuckerman. She now hopes that she can win the nomination this time, and hopefully defeat a very popular governor in Phil Scott. We now have a poll for the 2022 Iowa Governor Democrat primary poll. Rob Hogg at 24% of support, Joe Bolcom, 17% support. Chris Hall, 15% support. Janet Peterson, 14% support. Bob Kraus, 12%. And Nate Bolton, 6%. Not a lot of change from the last time we did a poll, but it does seem like this isn't anyone's game at the moment. Senator Richard Shelby announces his intention to run for re-election in the Alabama Senate race. A former Democrat, Richard Shelby is a very popular senator, someone who's been in the Senate for years. He hopes that he can do something he hopes that he can win re-election, knowing that Alabama will be targeted by Democrats. As Democrats did have a seat in Alabama not too long ago. Democrats will be hoping to flip the seat again, even if it is fruitless in the end. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey has announced that she will be seeking re-election into the 2022 gubernatorial race. A very popular governor, Kay Ivey succeeded to the governorship back in 2017, and she has been popular ever since. Her handling of the coronavirus has been largely approved by the people of Alabama. Georgia Senator Doug Collins has announced that he will be running for re-election in 2022. Doug Collins entered the 2020 Georgia special election race and went to a runoff with Senator Kelly Loeffler, defeating her by roughly 2 to 3 percentage points. Georgia will be another seat that Democrats are hoping to flip, as it is trending blue and blue fast. Doug Collins wants to do a lot to keep his seat into the red column if he wants to stay a senator. Former Congressman Larry LaRocco has announced his intention to run for Senate in 2022. The last Democrat congressman from the state of Idaho, Larry LaRocco, had very good popularity despite being a Democrat. He did lose, however, despite his popularity. He is hoping he can ride that wave into the 2022 and defeat Mike Crapo. Indiana Senator Todd Young has announced that he will be running for re-election in 2022. A very middle-of-the-road senator, Todd Young believes he has a great chance to win re-election, as not a lot of Indiana Democrats are really as polarizing as they should be, as Indiana was a state that did flip blue in 2008, but ever since has been a safe Republican state. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022, a very popular senator. James Lankford feels like he has no trouble cruising to re-election. Columbia Mayor Stephen K. Benjamin has announced that he will be running for governor in 2022. South Carolina, a state that Democrats targeted back in the 2020 election, Stephen K. Benjamin feels like he can flip the governor's seat blue, defeating Henry McMaster, saying his handling of the coronavirus was less than what it needed to be. Far less than what it needed to be. Former Senator Doug Jones announces he will be running for Senate again in 2022. Doug Jones lost his seat to Tommy Tuberville back in 2020, and is now trying to get a seat back to the Senate, maybe defeating Richard Shelby. Maybe that midterm magic will help him this time. Congressman David Schweikert has announced his intention to run for governor of Arizona in 2022. Arizona, a state that has been trending blue and blue fast, a state that Joe Biden won back in 2020. David Schweikert is going to have to do a lot to be able to keep the seat red, as Doug Ducey is term limited. David Schweikert, a very popular congressman amongst moderates and centrist Republicans. Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has announced her intention to run for re-election in 2022. A very popular senator, Catherine Cortez Masto will have little to no trouble cruising to re-election. Then again, there are a couple of Republicans who could throw a wrench into her plans if they were to campaign right. State Senator Eric Lesser has announced his intention to run for governor of Massachusetts in 2022, the second Democrat to do so. His plan would essentially to do a more liberal version of Charlie Baker's governorship, saying Charlie Baker has not been doing his job as governor of Massachusetts during the coronavirus pandemic. despite his high approval rating. State House Speaker Tina Kotek has announced that she will be running for governor of Oregon in 2022. A Democrat, Oregon has seen many riots and many uptakes in the coronavirus pandemic and with rioting. Though a lot of Democrats are hoping to unite both sides, Tina Kotek is one of those candidates that the Democrats are hoping to be pushed to the top of the ticket. Vermont Governor Phil Scott has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. A very popular governor, Phil Scott won his seat by a very safe margin against the then Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman. Phil Scott will have to do everything he can. Well, not really. He is a very popular governor, so he shouldn't face all that much trouble. Though, considering it is a midterm wave that is being expected, Phil Scott will have to do some more campaigns than it did in 2020 and not use the virus as an excuse. Dr. Al Gross announces his intention to run for Senate again in 2022. Al Gross doing very well in the 2020 Alaska Senator race against Senator Sullivan. Al Gross now sees division within the party as Lisa Murkowski could be challenged by a good challenger, a primary challenge, as President Trump has announced that he will be endorsing a challenger to Murkowski. Florida Congressman Ted Deutsch has announced that he will be running for Senate in 2022. Ted Deutsch willingly giving up his seat to run for Senate. He feels like nobody else can be able to do the job like he can if he were to run for Senate. Former state Congresswoman Stacey Abrams announced that she will be running for Senate in 2022. Stacey Abrams was slotted to be Joe Biden's running mate for the longest time. However, she opted out, as nobody understood why. So we now know why she has been preparing for a Senate bid in 2022. Doug Collins has a lot on his plate to work with, as Stacey Abrams almost won in the 2018 Georgia gubernatorial race against Brian Kemp, who is a very middle-of-the-road governor when it comes to his approval. Former Congressman Charles DeJoe has announced that he will be running for Senate in 2022 as a Republican. He's been an independent since 2015-2014, but he has now opted to join the Republican Party again and run against Matthew Hodono in 2022, hoping to flip the Hawaii Senate seat red for the first time in many, many years. Former Senator Mark Kirk has announced that he will be running for Senate in 2022. The second former senator to announce his intention to go back to the Senate. Mark Kirk is hoping to bring the Tea Party movement back in 2022, citing that Donald Trump has not been the president that the people deserve, and that he will bring order back into the Republican Party. Maine Governor Janet Mills announced that she will be running for governor in 2022. A very middle-of-the-road governor when it comes to her approval on the coronavirus pandemic. She hasn't seen her approval go up or down from it, but she is very popular enough that she could be able to win re-election based off the first round of mail-in voting. Former Congressman Todd Tiahrt has announced his intention to run for governor in Kansas in 2022. Todd Tiahrt lost a re-election bid to the current Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He is now hoping to run for governor and undo Chris Kobach's mistake of losing to Laura Kelly in 2022. Former State Auditor Adam Edelin has announced his intention to run for Senate in 2022. Rand Paul, a very popular governor, he does face little to no opposition, but Adam Edelin could prove that even Democrats can still win in the Deep South, as proven by Andy Beshear. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has announced that she will be running for re-election in 2022. Gretchen Whitmer's status went to the National League after her handling of the coronavirus pandemic was slated as swift. Gretchen Whitmer has seen her popularity dip a little bit, but she does not seem to be worried, as many pundits are saying that she could win re-election by a landslide. Former Governor Tim Pawlenty has announced that he will be running for governor of Minnesota. yet again in 2022, the former one-term governor does have his intention to run state. And this is all based off of that he does not like Mike Lindell nor Tim Walz, stating that they're both terrible politicians that would ruin the state of Minnesota and that only he can fix the damages. Former State Senator Connie Johnson has announced her intention to run for governor of Oklahoma in 2022. The second Democrat to do so, a very popular she was very popular as a state senator back in Oklahoma. She is hoping to get some of that midterm magic in this race. CEO Merrick Fulson has announced his intention to run for governor in 2022, the first Republican to do so, citing the riots and the virus handling of Governor Brown has not been ideal, and that we should not have a socialist in the office like Mayor Wheeler. We now have the on the issues polls from the first New Hampshire Governor Democrat debate, as Steve Marchand has a 23% support for his drug abuse policy, 24% for his state tax policy, 26% for his health care policy, 32% for his state budget policy, 29% support for a state economy policy, and 27% of voters thought he had won the debate. Andrew Volinsky has a 36% support on drug abuse policy, 23% support on the state tax policy, 18% support on the health care policy, 30% support on the state budget policy, 32% support for the state economy policy, and 28% of voters thought he had won the debate. Mark Connolly, 20% of voters thought support his drug abuse policy, 17% of voters thought he support his state tax policy, 26% of voters support his health care policy, 32% of support his state budget policy, 29% support his state economy policy, and 25% of voters thought he had won the debate. Colin Van Ostern, 21% support for his drug abuse policy, 36% support for his state tax policy, 30% support for his health care policy, 16% for his state budget policy, 10% support for his state economy policy, and 20% of voters thought he had won the debate. We have now some polling out of the 2022 Alabama Senate Democrat primary. Doug Jones, 62% to Sue Bell Cobb's 36%. Doug Jones, a wide lead over Bill Cobb. In the 2022 Massachusetts Governor Democrat primary poll, Marty Walsh has a 56%. Is at 56%. Eric Lesser's 40%. A 16-point lead for Mayor Walsh. State Attorney General Josh Shapiro has announced his intention to run for Senate in Pennsylvania in 2022, a seat that many Democrats are hoping to flip in 2022 to give them the majority. Josh Shapiro says he is the best candidate to do so, and his popularity could prove him right. We now have polling out of the 2022 Florida Senate Democrat primary. Ted Deutch was 62% to Bob Buckhorn 21% each. Big difference, as Bob Buckhorn does not have the support of Ted Deutch, who has. We have polling out of the 2022 Minnesota Republican Governor primary. Tim Pawlenty with 51% to Mike Lindell's 48%. A clear tight race here, as many things can go, as we can still have debates down the line between the two. We have polling out of the 2022 Oklahoma Governor Democrat primary, as Connie Johnson is at 50% to Joe Dorman's 43%, a 7-point difference between the two. We have polling out of the 2022 New Hampshire Governor Democrat primary, as Andrew Volinsky has 28% support. Colin Van Ostern has 27%, with a 1-point lead for Volinsky. Mark Connolly at 15% and Steve Marchand at 10%. This race is still anyone's game, but it doesn't look like Steve Marchand has what it takes to win the nomination. Former State Attorney General Adam Laxalt has announced his intention to run for Senate in 2022. The second Republican to do so. He says that this is the Republicans' hope for flipping the Nevada Senate seat that they have attempted to flip for so many years. Maybe Adam Laxalt is their knight in shining armor, per se, to do so. Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson has announced his intention to run for governor of Texas in 2022. One of the many black mayors in Texas, he is very popular among Dallas voters. He is hoping that his popularity could rise into the nomination over Beto O'Rourke, who is shown to be very unpopular, and Julian Castro, who is seen falters with his 2020 campaign for president. We now have the polling ahead of the 2022 Nevada Republican Senate primary, as Adam Laxalt has 54% to Sharon Ingalls 44%, a near 10-point difference between the two. Out of the 2022 Texas Governor Democrat primary, Beto O'Rourke currently leads with 42%, Julian Castro leads 38%, Eric Johnson leads 11%. We have the first Colorado Governor Republican debate. The results from the On the Issues polls. Victor Mitchell has a 20% support on his socialism policy, 18% on his climate policy, 22% support on his healthcare policy, 23% support for his red flag laws policy, 32% support for his education policy, and 23% of voters thought he had won the debate. Brian Watson, 22% support his socialism policy, 16% support his climate policy, 13% support his healthcare policy, 12% support his red flag laws policy, and 19% support his education policy. 16% of voters thought he had won the debate. Walker Stapleton, 46% support his socialism policy, 32% support his climate policy, 27% his healthcare policy, 45% support his red flag laws policy, 25% support his education policy, and a lot of voters thought he overwhelmingly won the debate, with 35% thinking he had won it. We now have some polling out of the 2022 Colorado Governor Republican primary, as Walker Stapleton has 39% support among voters, Victor Mitchell has 27%, and Brian Watson at 13%. A 12-point lead for Walker Stapleton, and it does seem like the nomination is in clear sight of him. Businessman John Georges has announced his intention to run for Senate in Louisiana, the second person to do so and the first Democrat to challenge Republican Senator John Neely Kennedy. John Georges is a very well-known businessman. It's not known if he's very popular or not. We haven't had very much polling from him, as nobody has seen this coming. John Georges could pull out a lot of money into this race to win this election. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. A very unpopular governor. He says he has defended his actions, stating that the coronavirus is a very big deal and that Minnesota was not ready to come out of the lockdown yet. That tanked his approval even further. As many Republicans are hoping to take him out of this seat, his approval has gone back up in recent months. But that still worries a bunch of Democrats for his hoping of re-election. Former Governor Jeff Collier has announced his intention to run for governor in Kansas in 2022. He was a very popular governor. A lot of people wonder why he's stepping back out of retirement to run for governor again. Maybe it's because of his party pride, who knows. But he does hope to win the nomination and take out Laura Kelly. We now have some polling at the 2022 Louisiana Senate primary. John Kennedy leading 62% to 31% John Georges. It looks like John Georges is now beginning to spend a lot of money. That number could very well change over the next months. But of course, we might have one or two more major candidates enter this race. If not, John Kennedy will cruise to re-election. The 2022 Kansas Republican Governor primary poll, we have Jeff Collier leading with 56% support to Todd Tiahrt 42% support. That is a lead of a net 14. Jeff Collier showing how popular he is compared to Congressman Tiahrt. He could cruise to re-election, or could cruise to winning re-election to a third term. State Senator Jeff Jackson has announced his intention to run for Senate in 2022. North Carolina's Senate seat will be an open seat, as Richard Burr had pledged to retire. I think he's the second candidate to announce his intention to run. And a very well-known state senator, Jeff Jackson, could win the nomination unless somebody else were to run. We have the On the Issues polls from the first New Hampshire Governor Republican debate. Don Bolduc has a 57% approval on his agriculture policy, 58% support on his working families policy, 51% on his education policy, 55% on his state tax policy, and 48% on his environment policy. 54% of voters thought he had won the debate. When it came to Frank Eldeblatt, 43% of support for his agriculture policy, 42% for his working families policy, 49% support for his education policy, 45% for his state tax policy, 52% for his environment policy, and 46% of voters thought he had won the debate. We have some polling as the 2022 New Hampshire Republican Senate primary, as Don Bolduc is leading with 58% of the vote, or with 58% support to Frank Eldeblatt's 38%. That is a net 20 points above a 20-point lead for Don Bolduc, as many voters seem to be, well, let's say, I don't know what the correct term, they seem to be confident in his ability to win the nomination and win the seat. We have the On the Issues polls from the first Alabama, that should say Senate, Democrat primary, as Doug Jones. Take a look at Doug Jones, 42% on his gambling policy, 52% support for his opioid crisis policy, 51% support for his education policy, 55% support for his crime policy, and 53% support for his Medicaid policy. 51% of voters thought he had won the debate. For Sue Bull Cobb, 58% supported her gambling policy, 48% supported her opioid crisis policy, 49% her education policy, 45% her crime policy, 47% support her Medicaid policy, and 49% thought she had won the debate. A very close debate. Nobody saw coming, as people thought Doug Jones was going to steamroll in this debate. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. A very popular governor with approvals up in the high 50s, low 60s. One of the big four liberal Republican governors, as I call them. He is announcing his intention to run, and there is little to no doubt that he will win big in 2022. We have a poll from the 2022 Alabama Senate primary, a Senate Democrat primary, as Doug Jones leads 55 to 43, a net 13 points above the lead. Not like it's a near 30-point lead back in our last poll. So this race, thanks to the debate, have tightened the race, and we could be seeing a very close contested primary between the two. Former state Senator Nina Turner has announced her intention to run for governor of Ohio in 2022. Very well known for being one of Bernie Sanders' closest associates, Nina Turner is a progressive at heart, a very popular one at that. But Ohio has been trending more and more red as the years go by. Could Nina Turner win the nomination and win the governor race altogether? Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has announced his intention to run for re-election in 2022. A very middle-of-the-road governor. Not many people know about him, but his approval on the coronavirus pandemic has been steady and high. Bill Lee should not see any major opposition in the primary or the general, so his re-election should be kept intact. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the Chaotic One saying, peace.